Farmer. Let's go through these stories in a bit more detail. Jack Rowlett is a political commentator with Young Voices UK. Jack, good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to start, if I can, with the front page of the Eye. If you could explain what's going on here. The headline is, sign an NDA to see charges. This is what some owners of new build properties are being told. Why on earth would that be the case?
Yeah, so this is the ongoing sort of scandal over freehold properties and the kind of ongoing charges for the maintenance of facilities and services associated with those properties. So sort of community centres, bin collections, that type of thing. And we've seen a lot of problems with these fees being totally uncapped and unregulated, and consequently people having to pay hundreds of pounds in fees when they're not entirely sure what they're getting, why they're having to pay that amount of money, exactly how it's being spent. And what we're now seeing is that people, in order to get access to that information, they're having to sign non-disclosure agreements first. And it's just the latest step in this appalling scandal, really. And homeowners facing enormous difficulties just simply getting answers. And sadly, this is just a feature of lots of new build properties. I think the government really does need to step in. I feel like they've been absolutely dragging their heels on this issue for so long. We know that it's kind of been on the agenda for some time. Michael Gove has talked about sorting it out, about regulating these fees and moving freeholders' rights more in line with other types of property ownership. There seems to be a cross-party consensus on this. It's a popular reform of the country, so I don't understand why it's taking them so long, because it's absolutely absurd that people can end up losing their homes because they can't afford to pay these uncapped fees, which don't even offer good value for money in lots of cases.
Yeah, the paper talks about the case of, this is Michael Forster. He's 43, he's an accountant, and said he spent years trying to dispute fees with management. He said, we've got no defence. They can put in a bill for, let's say, £1 million, and we all have to pay it because we're freeholders. We don't have the right to challenge it in court. And they say, occasionally, if they have to travel to go and see these documents, they're not allowed to take copies, take photographs of them. I mean, you wonder why this is allowed.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's one of these awful things where to any reasonable person, it seems utterly immoral, like it should be illegal, or at the very least, very closely regulated. And yet it seems to be perfectly allowed. It's just another example of Britain's broken housing system, really. And it's ordinary people, ordinary property owners who are paying the price. And it's government's job to step in, and they need to do so urgently, and this would be a political win for them.
Yeah, let's talk about housing. Clearly a significant priority for many of the public when it comes to voting. There's a poll inside the Times today that says even a resurgent economy would not save Sunak. Voters don't believe the Conservative Party will cut taxes, and nearly half would still vote Labour even if the economy doesn't improve before the election. It's pretty grim reading for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, it is. I think actually, if the economy were to improve, the Tories would see an improvement in their poll ratings. I think what we're actually seeing in terms of this poll is people not believing that the Tories are going to improve the economy. I think that's what this is a reflection of. People just can't even imagine it. That's the state that the British economy has got to, and that's the kind of decimation, really, of the Tories' reputation for economic management. Although, if you look back to the 1990s, the economy, of course, did improve a lot in the run-up to the 1997 general election. Still wasn't enough to save John Major. And I think the Tories are in a much worse position now than they were then. And I think, once the country decides it's time for a change, they've decided it's time for a change. There's not really much the governing party can do to win back support.
Yeah, one of the big things is after the next election that the public were asked, how would you expect taxes to change? Well, 41% of people asked said if the Conservatives win, they think taxes would go up. The Prime Minister has said again and again that I want to cut taxes, but of course there's little headroom with, inflation and what's actually happening with our growth. But it sounds like the messaging that the Conservatives want to transmit isn't really being received.
No, absolutely, because we've seen the two most recent fiscal events from the government have been the biggest tax cutting events since the 1980s, and there's just been absolutely no cut through. People just don't really seem to care because the state of the economy more broadly, in terms of wages, in terms of living costs, are so poor that actually you can cut taxes all you like. It's not going to improve living conditions and living standards for lots of people at the moment. It's not enough on its own, and that key dividing line between the Tories and Labour is gone because the Tories kept putting up taxes for so long. So people just don't trust them on the issue anymore.
Well, Trevor Phillips has this brilliant piece in the Times comment section this morning. He says, soaring political rhetoric doesn't fix potholes. With local elections ahead, politicians would do well to stop talking about Gaza and concentrate on everyday issues. Do you think he's got a point?
I think he's got a point in the sense that we do need to start talking about the issues that matter to people. But I don't think that's necessarily mutually exclusive from sort of vision and lofty rhetoric. I think actually the best politicians can use lofty rhetoric to sort of make solving everyday problems seem like a magical collective effort and allows you to bring people with you. I think he notes the example of Obama actually saying that he's sort of a failure as a president, despite the fact that he was a good orator and a great visionary. I think actually you need both. You need politicians that are capable of acting on people's priorities, and politicians that can inspire people that are ambitious. Part of the problem lately, politicians just don't seem to have much ambition anymore. In the 1960s, we used to talk about putting people on the moon, and now it's, can we cut taxes by, 1p in the pound to kind of save our skins at the general election. It's just, we actually need more ambition. But I think where the column does make a really important point is policy priorities need to be more in line with policies that are going to improve people's lives. And what we're seeing with the hate crime legislation in Scotland, for example, or the excessive focus on Gaza in more domestic situations where it's not necessarily entirely appropriate, we're seeing a focus on policies that don't actually mean anything to people's day-to-day lives.
Trevor says, extraordinarily, no one seems to be too interested in the looming prospect of scores of councils going bust, leaving shuttered parks, collapsing social care, rusting shop fronts and overflowing bins. This should be causing party leaders nightmares. It may not be the case. How many times do we talk about potholes? And I remember one texter said, if we can't trust the government to fix potholes, why would we trust them on anything else? And that generated quite a lot of response, Jack. There's another comment piece that I think is interesting today. Of course, last week, Thursday evening it was Aubrey Allegretti who broke the story of the honey trap, the latest in the sort of Westminster honey trap scandal. Libby Purves said this morning, sending nudes has become normal. It is not. The behavioural changes brought by smartphones have been vast and rapid. Let's hope that's not the end of the story. I wonder what you think now we've had a few days on from this, of the case that she's making.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to level with you. Sending nudes is not my cup of tea, but I don't think there's any innate problem with it, provided, of course, that the person on the other end wants to see it. But I think like so many other things we do on our phones, there's kind of a sense of detachment between the digital act and the real world consequences of that act. It's sort of like people who say things online that they would never say in real life, and that leads to people like Will Bragg doing stupid things that put themselves and others in danger. And I think we do need more of a culture of caution over what we share online, and that goes for the general public, and it especially goes for MPs too, given the threats we're facing from hostile actors in China, Russia, etc. We absolutely don't want a situation where legislators end up being blackmailed like this. And I think the way Will Bragg's behaved is extremely foolish. And I find it baffling that we've had so much coverage of him that's sort of painting him as brave. No, the brave thing to do would have been not to share the phone numbers of his colleagues and to come forward straight away. I think he did the cowardly thing, and I think he should resign on a point of principle.
Yeah, Libby says the MPs get lonely, a bit vain, and short of honest intimacy is an obvious problem, but they are adults, painstakingly selected to attain the pinnacle of public life. They're so past the forgivable nonsenses of puberty that you can be revered as senior in the ruling party. It's worth a read this morning, definitely. Final thing I want to ask you about, Jack, is politicians' outfits and style. Rishi Sunak was asked about the length of his suit, I think, last week by The Sun on Never Mind the Ballots. His shoe choice, the headline here in the Times is Sunak's Samba step puts shoe of the moment back in its box. Politicians have got the power to do quite a lot of things, and it turns out also to put a stop in a trendy trainer.
Well, yeah, I mean, you really know your brand has become toxic when you can ruin a shoe for the country. I mean, I'm old enough to remember during the pandemic when we were all fawning over Rishi Sunak's hoodies and his
Oh,
great
yes, we were,
sort of
and his
techno
sliders.
sense of style. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a real reflection of his fall from grace. And it's I mean, it seems like he can't get anything right.
His shoes do often generate headlines, like the Prada loafers that were on the building site. That was a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, yeah, it does seem it sort of reflects his personality and the increasing sort of sense that we're feeling he might be a little bit out of touch, but it just doesn't seem to occur to him that he might be sort of painting the wrong image for the country.
Jack, thank you very much. Jack Rowlett, political commentator with Young Voices UK.